Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom. I'm David Mencer, Israeli government spokesman. A short update from me and then over to your questions. It's Tuesday, the 16th of July, day 284 of the October 7th war. First, our hostages, 120 of them, men, women, children, the elderly, Israelis, but also from 24 nationalities. Horrific abuse, 9 months now. Yesterday, we talked about Nimrod Cohen, who turned 20 yesterday in the Hamas terror dungeons. His twin sister Romy says that half of her is missing. Today, it's Ziv and Gilly Berman, 26 years old, also twins, abducted from Kibbutz Nachal Oz. Are they being held together? Their mum Talia says, "I have no choice but to have hope. I can't afford to break down. I'm helpless, but there's nothing I can do about it. Every day I imagine the moment they return. I hope they come back together. I told the IDF officer in charge of us that I want them to have a shared room in the hospital so I don't have to run from one to the other." Look at them, please. Say their names. 284 days. 120 need to be freed. Israel will not rest until they are all home. Hamas will be destroyed together with their terrorist threat to Israel. And we will return our residents securely to their homes in the south and the north. Next, an update from COGAT and their work coordinating aid into Gaza over the last 24 hours. 245 trucks with humanitarian aid goods went in via Kerem Shalom and Erez. And as has become regular, 8 tankers of fuel and 6 tankers of cooking gas went in for vital humanitarian infrastructure. 17 pallets of 3.08 tons were airdropped over Gaza yesterday. But a mere 100 trucks were collected from the Gazan side of Kerem Shalom. Only 28 by UN aid agencies and 72 by the private sector. And as usual, we remind you that the content of over 1,100 aid trucks is still awaiting, languishing in the sun, waiting collection from Kerem Shalom. More than enough food to feed all of Gaza has gone in, 80% more food compared to prior to October the 7th. And despite that, every day we are expanding our efforts to get more in. Now, before we finish, a special word about Philip Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNRWA. Allow me to be a little undiplomatic and get straight to the point. Israeli forces have retrieved millions of documents in captured enemy material. This new intelligence exposes 2 undeniable facts. First, the involvement of the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, UNRWA, employees in the October 7th massacre. Second, the deep and systemic infiltration by those terror organizations, Hamas, but also Palestinian Islamic Jihad, into the ranks of UNRWA. Now, if the UN was doing what it was designed to do, then Philip Lazzarini should be one of the good guys. But he is not. He is one of the bad guys. A terrorist sympathizer, a Jew-killing enabler, a liar. Mr. Lazzarini has been given evidence of the UNRWA-Hamas nexus. It is literally impossible not to see that cooperation. You can Google it for yourselves. Google UNRWA, and after going past the UNRWA propaganda, you'll see our website. Now, we have handed over the evidence to the UN, to the Secretary General, to other governments. Mr. Lazzarini often repeats the claim that Israel has not shared the information about UNRWA and Hamas. He lies. Shame on you, Mr. Lazzarini. Shame on you. History will remember you as an accomplice to Jew killing and someone that prolonged the suffering of ordinary Gazans. Shame on you, Mr. Lazzarini. That's the end of our briefing today. I will now take your questions, which you should put in the chat together with your news outlet. Thank you. First question from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Could you comment on the prayer yesterday at the Republican National Convention for the welfare of the Israeli hostages? Thank you very much for that question, Joel. It's a bedrock of importance for Israel that the support for Israel and the cooperation between Israel and the United States is a bipartisan relationship. So that's always been very, very important. And that will be reiterated next week when the Prime Minister addresses both houses of Congress. But I will say that Israel has made very clear that it welcomes all international efforts to free our hostages. We've made that appeal to everyone to do what they can to free our hostages, whether it's the Chinese government and their close relationship to the Palestinian leadership and Hamas as well, to use your influence to free our hostages, whether it's the British government who visited here recently, who have good relationships with both Israel and the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian leadership. Our hostages need to come home. So whoever prays for our hostages, whoever does anything to get our hostages home is a welcome development. This is an international outrage. Every moment they are in custody is a humanitarian, it's a contradiction, a contravention of humanitarian law. Next, Marvel Entertainment, also from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Number 2, Marvel Entertainment has erased the Israeli identity of Sabra, an Israeli character in an upcoming film, making her Russian instead. Could you comment on the change, and does it reflect a capitulation to anti-Israel activists? Thank you for that question, Joel. So Marvel's choice of characters for their next movie is a little bit beyond my brief. I hope you'll forgive me for not commenting on this subject. I will say, however, that the global rise of anti-Semitism, of demonization of Jews, of protesting outside synagogues, we recognize these things for what they are. We, the Jewish people, have experienced evil. We recognize evil when we see it. It's within our DNA. Generations, thousands of years of discrimination and racism against the Jewish people means that we understand only too well what anti-Semitism and Jew hatred is. We know exactly what it is when we see it. We saw it on October the 7th, and we have seen it many, many times since then. It's growing in Europe, it's growing in North America, it's growing all around the world, this menace of Jew hatred. But my message to Jews around the world is stand proud in your identity. Do not hide behind ever higher and higher walls. Do not fall for any of these sorts of excuses for the reason we're not anti-Israel, we're not anti-Jewish, we're just anti-Israel. Anti-Zionism has long ago been shown to be anti-Semitism. If you do not believe that the Jewish people have a right to their own homeland, only one Jewish state in the world, if you do not believe that the Jewish people have a right to their own homeland, despite there being 50 Islamic countries, umpteen Christian countries, and from other faiths as well, there is only one Jewish homeland. If you do not believe that Israel has a right to exist and to defend itself, then you are a racist. Next question is from Hannah Julian from the Jewish Press. Hamas claims that Mohammed Daif survived the IDF attack that killed Rafi Salameh a few days ago. Is it possible that Daif has once again escaped the assassination, or is the claim he survived just Hamas disinformation? Thank you for that question, Hannah. I haven't got an update from the Prime Minister's update on Saturday night. The Prime Minister gave authorization for that attack on this terrorist fiend, the number 2 in Hamas. So I haven't got anything more to add, but I will say that Hamas are murderers, and these murderers, their leadership, whether it's whoever it is in their leadership, they are dead men walking. The Prime Minister has been made very clear that one way or another, we will reach the entire Hamas leadership, every single one of them. Now, Hamas targeted Daesh because of precise intelligence. He was found in a compound where these 2 senior Hamas targets were hiding. He's an arch murderer, this Daesh. He's their military leader, together with Rafah Salameh. Look, Daesh was the architect in chief as chief of staff and the number 2 in the chain of command. It was Daesh who planned and led the October 7th massacre. I will remind you, Hannah, that Hamas still say there were no rapes on October the 7th, when we have the testimony from so many witnesses of the appalling use of rape as a weapon of war against our people. The terrible things which they did, I would encourage you to watch the film Screams Before Silence, which is available freely on YouTube, and the many other additional terrorist attacks which they're responsible for. Daesh, his hands are soaked in the blood of many, many Israelis. And before this action, we took a lot of effort to make sure there was as little as possible harm to civilians and uninvolved persons. And of course, our intel was that there were no hostages in the compound where these 2 were. So, look, these were senior operatives from the military branch of Hamas. They had personal responsibility for planning and carrying out hundreds of terrorist attacks against Israeli civilians. They are crimes against humanity, brutal murders, rapes, and the kidnapping of civilians, all carried out as part of their terrorist attack on October the 7th. So if they are dead, and we hope that Daesh is, we haven't got confirmation on that, if they are dead, then it'll be a good thing for humanity. Next question from J.P. Rubin from Breslov, Israel. According to Babola from the university in Nigeria, the general objective of diplomacy is peace and cooperation between states, which can be used in times of war or conflict. Is this objective shared by the Israeli government? Regards. Mr. Rubin, I'm not precisely sure what your question is. We have made clear that in this war we have 3 objectives. The first objective is to bring home our hostages, 120 of them. The second objective is to destroy Hamas, its military capabilities and its governing capabilities. And the third is to ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to this country. We know that we're making tremendous progress. Every single day we're making tremendous progress. Our efforts right now to free our hostages would speak to the diplomatic efforts which you mentioned in your question, but we know that the only way that diplomacy has an effect on Hamas in particular is backed up by strong military pressure against this dastardly terrorist bunch of murderers. They are a terrorist bunch of murderers, and the only way to get anything, to get our hostages back, is a combination of the two: diplomacy, but also harsh military pressure to take out these terrorists. Next question here from Jody Cohen. Can you please comment on the reported CIA assessment that Hamas commanders are urging Sinwar to agree to a deal for a ceasefire? Thank you very much for that question, Jody Cohen from World is One News in India. Look, the only thing I can confirm, and you probably heard yesterday Matt Miller at the State Department saying that these discussions are ongoing. From Israel's perspective, we're making all the efforts we can to get our hostages out. The framework, which has been agreed upon by Israel and has the support of President Biden, is designed to get our hostages out without obstructing the other goals of this war. We've got several basic demands. The option to return to fighting until all the goals of the war are met, prevention of smuggling ammunition from Egypt into Gaza, and preventing the return of thousands of armed terrorists to the north of Gaza, and maximizing the number of living hostages that return from Hamas captivity. Okay, is there another question? No? Okay, I've got another question here from, excuse me, I'll just bring it up here. It was texted to me privately, and that question is from Dan Williams of Bloomberg. And the question from Dan Williams at Bloomberg is, what came of the Israeli negotiators' trip to Qatar and Egypt last week? There appears to have been a lull in diplomacy this week. Is this due to the IDF airstrike on Daif and Salameh on Saturday? How close are Israel and Hamas to a truce and hostage release? Thank you for that question, Dan, which was texted to me personally. Can I encourage you all to put questions inside the chat on this Zoom to enable me to answer them? I think in my last question, Dan, I was able to give you an idea of the Israeli position on these negotiations, which, according to Matt Miller of the State Department, are ongoing. We want these discussions to succeed. We want to get our people out of the Hamas rapists' army clutches. We want to bring our people home and back to their families, and of course to bring home bodies of our hostages, people that Hamas have already murdered, to allow them a decent burial here in Israel or wherever their families see fit. Okay, my friends, that is the last question which we have received. Thank you for joining us here today. We'll be here with another briefing at the same time tomorrow. Please stay safe, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.